for our audience, for those of you in LA, the installation Mona Kuhn, the Schindler House, A Love Affair is on view at the Bergamot Station in Santa Monica until October 12th. Um, it's actually funny because I can be considered as Mona's most assiduous scholar. I've seen three iterations of the installation. Um, and I even included Mona's work, this installation, in my classes at UCLA as a way to foster my students' curiosity um, in terms of photography, architecture, and where those two media kind of going, in the realm of AI and NFTs. I mean, looking at spatialized photography and combination of photography and sound, it was a way, again, to foster my students' curiosity in new forms and new media. But to start our conversation, I do want to focus on your previous collaboration as part of this art festival at the Fruit Factory in Chapel Hill, North Carolina in 2016. Boris, please walk us through the project and tell us more about the sound that you designed for this piece. And meanwhile, I will share a few snippets.
Yes, maybe start with the snippets. In the meantime, I can be openly surprised that it's been that long already, 2016. Let's look at the video real quick and then I continue talking. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So that exhibition was a fantastic first opportunity for us to actually create a immersive installation. It was room specific. It consisted of multiple segments. There were more rooms that we didn't see in the videos. It was based on Mona's work in the desert mostly. Therefore, it had a very different connotation than the current Schindler House. It was more, well, like the desert is, more primal, more minimal, transcendent, I want to say. It was therefore translated the sound also into a more timeless sound. There was also no narration. There was no timeline in the art itself. It was infinite loops, and we were really trying to trigger subconscious reactions here, and that's why we kept it mostly in the realm of sound design instead of music. Sounds of desert wind, animals, flies flying to the light, but then in the end dying, kinds of that nature.
And so as a follow-up question, Mona, how did you conceive of the spatial arrangements in this installation from 2016?
So what we had was a proposal from a collector and a group of collectors in North Carolina that had a very large factory space. And they said, well, you can come over and create anything you want. Why don't you make some photos? And it was pretty big, to the point where I couldn't really imagine printing so many images to fill up the space. This is an image of one room. There were various rooms. And at that moment, that idea of hanging the large photographs, so oversized photographs in between the columns, because you see here, you have the columns of the factory, which could not be avoided. So we placed them in between, and then we wanted to create a unifying feeling to the exhibition. So we had behind the hanging photographs, we created this space, like a 3D space, where we placed foils all around. It was very experimental. It was a couple of years ago. And we had multiple small projectors all over the ground area, as well as hanging, projecting a unifying golden kind of movement, silky movement to it that was in line with the sound that Boris created. And at the same time, it gave that feeling that something is with the music, something is really precious, something is really interesting. Entering this room, it took time for people to get acquainted with your own eyes to the tone of the large photographs, and then to this golden feel behind. But the one important thing to point out here, and what was so successful and we wanted to do again, is that we went beyond the photo here and we created a space. I think that that is a little seed from an early work that then grew into something else.
And so I guess the space you're referring to is the space, I don't know if everyone can see my pointer, but this is the space between the large prints, right?
Right.
This is where a lot of is happening. Can you describe that a little more for us?
Yeah, so that was just where this unifying element that was also synced with the music will be moving. And so if we go to the next slide,
Which is the video again.
no, yeah, if we cross that and go into the next one. So that, in a way, I'm jumping a little bit, but as we get into the Schindler House, we wanted to recreate the sense of space that came from the previous, earlier collaboration.
I can definitely see how the project in North Carolina in the fruit factory replanted a seed for other collaborations. Going back to the sound, so Boris, you told me that the sound was, and you told everyone that the sound was abstract and there was more maybe abstract themes that you tried to address and to explore. However, jumping to this iteration here, the current project, the Schindler House, you felt that the score had to be more melodic in a sense because of the historical background, because of the visual love story in Mona's pictures, and also Schindler's personal notes. So what are the first few audio elements that you laid out as you were composing the score? How did you start, basically? How did you start composing that score for this piece?
So there's two elements. Let me start with the second one that I wanted to talk about. But the common one between this and the fruit factory is that we kept the very important element of a spatial installation. And with the fruit factory, it was honestly because it was just great and interesting and immersive in itself. With Schindler, of course, it's always great to have something immersive, but with Schindler, there's another reason to do it, because he is basically known as the space architect. So he reinvented how to work with rooms, with spaces. And that, for me, then was immediately clear, whatever the emotional content of the audio will be, it will have to be playing with 3 dimensions at least. So that's a commonality. In terms of content, I said it earlier, the Fruit Factory was actually only sound design. There was no music, there was no harmony, no instruments that we know in there. Schindler, because of what Mona created in the sense of her photograph series, but also then the video, there are suddenly characters involved. There are people. There's a man, there's a mysterious woman, there's a love story where we don't know what actually happened. So that's very different than the purely abstract desert work before. And also there is a timeline this time in the storytelling, because there's a video that is 12 minutes long, and things happen at a certain moment. So I approached this more similar to a movie score or TV score that I do, because we are telling a story. There's also more direct emotions involved because of the love story aspect. And then, as always, before I start working, I like to approach things in a conceptual manner. Of course, I looked a million times at Mona's photos before, but I also read up on Schindler, there's not much being said about his musical affinity. But at that time in Los Angeles, a few important things happened in science, but also in music. Schoenberg was living here, inventing the 12-tone music. One of his scholars was John Cage, who happened to have an affair with Pauline, Schindler's wife. So there's a few interesting aspects to that. So all of that kind of goes into a conceptual sketchbook for me. But then in the end, I try to, and people started recording music a little later. The music concrete was just about being born. So all of this became a pool of ideas, but then usually I just look at the images and try to get a gut feeling reaction. And in this case, different maybe than the Fruit Factory, because it's more a linear video. It was a collaboration that Mona also, I think, put on the helm as a director a little bit of that, and because she had a sensibility of what it is she actually wanted to transport with the images. So yeah, all of that together in the end created that.
Shall we play a little excerpt?
Sure. Yeah.
So that's a very tiny excerpt, but there's also something about the nature of the sound. It seems to me there's something physical. I remember like actual recordings of like the sound of like the wood and those panels, right, sliding, and then you also have some more lyrical components. How do you combine both?
Yes, there's sound designy elements in there. Some of them are actually recorded in the Schindler House. Some are recorded in my house, which sounds similar to Schindler's House. But there's a lot of, not in this part, but there are other parts where there's real instruments. There's a lot of piano actually in that score. There is string instruments, which, by the way, we had additional string instruments last week for the private opening here in Los Angeles that played in addition. Played live on that day. It was beautiful. I think you have a snippet of that too. And yes, combining these elements, the sound design elements, including me trying to modify recorded sounds with old recording techniques, tapes that have been recorded on top of each other for many times and then slowly have this degrading quality to them. I like combining those elements that are rarely combined, but that makes it interesting. And Schindler was also someone who was thinking outside the box. He was experimental. So even though we are using, I want to say, classical elements like pianos and strings, rarely do we actually fall into classical musical structures. So nothing is on a strict computerized grid, for example. So we follow almost like an expressionistic painting. We are setting accents of these different elements at different times, creating this experimental yet still comfortably sounding soundtrack.
So these are, for everyone in the audience, these are images of the installation and also this live performance that happened
for the live performance. Just to echo that spatial aspect, what we did is that we put the musicians at different points in the room, surrounding the audience, and then okay. here at the end, when the camera goes up, you see one of the string players, but there's other string players to the left and right behind the audience. And we deliberately also composed the elements for that live event in a way that they specifically play with this spatial aspect. So they would bounce the same kind of sound, the instruments, but at different times from different angles. So the audience was really surrounded. And on top of the music playing from the multiple speakers, the layout of the musicians, the orchestra, so to speak, around the people reflected that too. So first time for me that I did that.
It was such an amazing experience, I have to say, and it added such a beautiful layer to an already beautifully complex and rich multimedia installation. And it's kind of great to think that this piece here really stems from this one visit to the Schindler House, Mona. And the Schindler House, for you, you described it as a body, right?
Right.
You saw veins on the concrete. You saw other veins on the wooden panels. There's something about also the central design where energy, light, and air just flow freely. And you instantly, I remember that from our conversations, you instantly felt a sense of familiarity. And so I wonder, can you describe your initial encounter with the house and when that was and what you felt?
Yeah. So I do work with the body in my photography, and I think people say, well, you kind of project things that when you see people's work, you have a tendency of projecting your own into it. When I entered the Rudolf Schindler's house, the first thing that caught my eye was the poured in concrete, creating certain wrinkles, as if it was wrinkles, or the beautiful wood, exposed wood, and you could see the grain of the wood. And for me, that felt like, veins in the body. And as I started also learning more about him, I found this quote where he said that he built the house as if it was a body with a very strong backing. So you have those concrete walls holding the structure of this house. But he mentioned that nonetheless, the front of the house or the courtyard of the house should be open like a glass, or soft panels should be open like our heart and our soul to welcome friends from all, backgrounds, from all, workers and industrialists and collectors and bohemians. So I started learning more about him. I started going more to the architectural archives at UC Santa Barbara. And I started realizing that he was also very interested in the body. So this concept started forming in my thoughts that maybe for me, what we have that remains of him in the form of the house is in actuality his body. So we can metaphorically talk about his body of work, but I really wanted to go further and say that that's the remains. That's what remained of him, or the handwritings, but in the form of his body, what we had and what I could work with was the house.
You just mentioned the archives at UC Santa Barbara. What did you find in those archives?
So every time I start a new series, I always think that it's important to know what I am photographing, and I do my best work when I know the most about the subject. So I reached out to the architectural archives at UC Santa Barbara and was very happy to be able to work there and research, and they would bring me the boxes with plenty of things. I have been there a couple of times. The very first time they brought, I think, the material that a lot of people are mostly interested, which is the architectural drawings or things that Rudolf prepared for the world in a way that he wanted to show himself to the world. And already on the second or third visit, I realized that I was a lot more interested on the intimacy. I was a lot more interested on the unpublished material, or the little notes, or the notes that he regretted and then he scratched all over it. Like, to me, I wanted to I wanted to enter the mind of this architect, but I also wanted to find the man behind the architect. I wanted to find the vulnerable artist or the vulnerable creative person that migrated to the US, right? I mean, he came from Austria not knowing if things are going to work out or not. My family went from Germany to Brazil and then from Brazil to the US. And in a way, I think that there's a couple of parallels that I felt familiar with as I was getting deeper and deeper into understanding who he was.
Until you found a letter.
Until I did find in a very little folder among all those boxes, I found a little folded, it was a little piece of paper, maybe a 4x5 that was folded in four. And I opened it, and when I opened, I saw this very beautiful, very delicate handwritten note from Rudolf Schindler, signed by him. And what caught my eye right away was the first and possibly the last paragraph, where he says, "Your dreams will never, like so many, meet reality." And then he proceeds, "It's a mistake to place one whole world onto one point or person. The world is endlessly big and life rich without bottom. You will find your treasures without me." So it was it was a breakup letter. I felt the pain of writing and receiving this letter. So I felt the equal, I felt, that's just a feeling, but I felt that maybe he didn't want, there was an impossibility of the time. I think Rudolf and Pauline, they lived very unconventional lives. They had their various affairs. It's not about judging in that sense. It's more about the emotional level of someone longing for each other. But most important of all, the first sentence, "Your dream will never, like so many, meet reality," really hit me as a letter to himself, because we do know that he was underappreciated at the time. So maybe it's his dreams might also not have come true. And it also hit me on a generic, broader perspective of artists in general, or people, or the human in us. That we all have dreams that did not come true. And at the same time, I did feel a certain warmth to the way he wrote, a certain precision of how he wrote it. And I took on the task to bring them visually back together in the form of my work. So how I was going to do it at the time, I did not know yet. But I thought that that was my cue into the house and into the story, was to bring elements that are facts, like the records, the handwriting, or the house itself, but then bring a certain element of fiction. So the fact that he did not write this to anyone, is not addressed to someone, it's open-ended, the person. I asked a few scholars around. They knew of some people, some lovers that he had along the way, that actually also influenced him and helped him in his career in architecture, but they couldn't point out exactly who this one was. So I took the artistic liberty of creating this mysterious person.
Which we will get back to, excuse me, the mysterious woman
Yeah.
in a moment. But so with the installation, so what you just mentioned, you created such a beautiful experience because people walk through Schindler's vision, and there's something about the obviously the groundbreaking architecture vision, but it also become a spectator of an impossible love story, right, between Schindler and a mysterious woman. And actually, this is now that we're going to address this. I mean, can we talk about her for a moment and how you created her character, maybe?
Yes. So I knew that I wanted to, I had a couple of impossibilities. One, that I decided to bring them back together in my work, which is already in itself a little metaphysical. So I needed to also have them cross time to find each other again. I had to cross space in the sense that I don't know if this woman or this mysterious lover was ever accepted or ever entered this house. So or in her thoughts or in her longing, if she went there or if he longed for her to be there. So I wanted to incorporate all of that in the form of photography. And so I photographed the house in a very more emotional way. The house has been photographed by wonderful artists and photographers, and I wanted to bring to it a more spatial element, so a more peripheral vision, not the precision of the architecture, but the feeling that you have as you walk through. Maybe even the feeling that you have or about architecture as you happen to be thinking about someone else. So I wanted some elements to be a little blurry. I wanted some elements to address a little bit architecture and memory. So the images of the house went in that direction. The images of the archive of things that I included were pretty much straightforward archival work, copy work in a way. And then the woman I reached out to a friend of mine. She was finishing her PhD in psychology. And I asked her, I said, her name is Lucy. I said, Lucy, how are you? Good. We had worked before, so we had a sense of familiarity and trust with each other. And I said, how would you like to be this mysterious lover? In a way, a certain ghost of time, transporting yourself in and out of 1920s back and forth. And thank goodness, I think her studies had a little bit of a break there. And she said, I would love to be that spectral person. So a couple of things that I had to do to give an emphasis on transporting her in time was to use a photographic technique of the 1920s, which is the time, of course, we all know when the house was built, called solarization, which is a experimental darkroom technique that messes up and disrupts the processing mechanism while it's happening in the developer. So it's a analog back to the old school darkroom with an extra flash of light that is not supposed to happen. And in doing that, which is what the photosurrealists were doing in 1920s. So it ties in a little bit to the historical relevance of the house, but it also gave me that effect that I needed, which is that partial areas of the print would dematerialize completely. And other parts would be rendered as a black and white photography. And the fact that the artist doesn't have the control of it in the darkroom was also a fun experimental aspect of it.
Do you mind if I zoom in a little bit on this image?
Please, go ahead. So this was in an exhibition in Germany at the Kunsthaus in Göttingen, in Germany. It was curated by Gerhard Steidl, who is my publisher and has been working with me for more than 20 years. And we conceptualized a couple of things. The exhibition was in 3 floors. So one floor, we had the more spatial element that we talked about and saw some images. And then the other floor was just on that image where we were. It was this image where we wanted, one floor was about the mysterious woman and the photographs. One floor was about the archives and one floor was about the multimedia. So if you go back to that one of the archives. And the interesting part here to bring up too is, in terms of conservation, which is interesting, but also in terms of, and maybe I pass it on to Boris, because working with Steidl was added yet another layer to this installation, because Gerhard at some point he said, well, we have the surround sound with the original score that Boris did for the multimedia floor, but if we have for one floor, we should have for the other 2 floors as well. So that's when Steidl and Boris started collaborating.
Yeah, that was beautiful, because I don't know if you have a photo of the building, the museum, because it has like three.
You stop sharing quickly, and I'm
Okay,
going to share again.
the whole museum has 3 floors, and all 3 floors were used for Mona's exhibition. On the top floor, here it comes from the outside.
It's coming up. It's coming up.
Okay, so the whole museum has 3 floors, and all 3 floors were part of that exhibition. And on the top floor was the installation of the projection, of the immersive projection that is that we know. And on the other 2 floors, you can see it exactly. So all 3 floors were one big exhibition. And sound design, or musically, we also built towards the 3rd floor, which would be the 4th, I guess.
Well, in Europe, is the
Exactly.
2nd floor. So
So,
ignore the top. The
yes.
3rd floor in
So
itself is a reception
3 floors
area.
of exhibition.
Details.
Exactly, 3 floors of exhibition. On the first lowest floor of exhibition,
floor.
we used something very simple and minimal, just the sound of a typewriter, actually, but with a spatial sound system. So it would come from different corners or in the center suddenly, and then I would play with the reverberation of the sound, again playing into the space concepts of Schindler. You can take a sound, and through the reflections you apply to it, you can simulate small rooms, big rooms, no rooms. So I was playing with that. Then one.
No, wait.
Yeah.
Let me interject, because it was beautiful, this idea of having the images and the sound working together now in unexpected ways that we didn't think about before. For example, when we had all those archives of some reproductions from the archive, some envelopes, some of it, you don't want to be too heavy when a viewer comes in. You don't necessarily want them to read everything. It's more about of their own journey through those papers, through those little seeds of the past. So at the ground floor, they would walk in, they don't know what to expect. This image is more lit for the photography part, but as you entered, we had it dimmed so that it feels a little bit like an archive. So you would enter, you would start wandering through those papers. At times you would stop and feel that something visually is interesting, and you would capture a nugget of information, but it was never meant to be absorbed, or it was never really meant to be scholastic. And the nice thing that you would do as well as a viewer is that as you're going through those rows, you will hear this reverb of the faint typewriter in the background circulating around you. So at times you thought that the typewriter was on the far right or the far left or behind you, and then you would have this circulating part. And for me, what was also very interesting is that people would stay longer because of the music as well. It was intriguing. It had an intriguing element.
Beautiful. Is there anything we want to share about this iteration in terms of maybe the 2nd floor?
Yeah, and then the 2nd floor, the progression, both in terms of the
It's coming up. Please
the
bear
visual
with
part.
me. Yeah. Oh, I'm sharing it.
That's okay.
It's just a little bit of gymnastics. There we go.
Yeah, very good. So 2nd floor of exhibition was a bit of a transition between the minimal 1st floor and the final 3rd floor, which will be the video installation. So on this one, you have actual photographs of Mona, and then musically here it's still very sparse, but we had a piano, very minimal piano melody that then got deconstructed and distributed in the room, showing up, disappearing. Again, just like very minimal, guiding, taking the viewers by the hand when they wander through the room. For me, this was all very gratifying, because it's not easy to make spatial soundtrack. It sounds easy. Okay, you've put more than two speakers, but but in reality, in galleries and museums, very often there's just one speaker. Then you have to ask very nicely to have two, but to have four is just also technically more complex, both in the creation but also the technical setup there. And so this was a dream to have three floors that all had the surround sound experiences.
Well, this was also the floor devoted to this mysterious lover. So it was a floor where people would enter, they would go. The nicest thing for me was to see how people, as they enter, they start moving their bodies and their step in line with the steps of the piano that Boris had. And they were very melodic, they were very, they were a little longing, they had a longing, a little lonely, but never too sad. So it was a little mysterious and a little lonely and a little longing effect to it. And as you can tell on those images, some of them have almost a musical punctuation to it. And I noticed, which I never had seen before, that people would actually start walking in sync with the piano sound. So that was quite interesting to see the coming together of the architectural pieces, the image themselves, the photos, and the sound at once. This room here is is also the room where we had the wall with all of the images all combined of Lucy dead. So you would first get this as if you're walking through the house, and then you will get into this one wall with all of the solarized prints. Those are actually offset prints that were done, a special collaboration. This is not necessarily the solarization that I do on the standard exhibitions. This is a collaboration with me and Steidl doing solarization on the offset printing machines. So that's a whole other conversation, but that was the beautiful wall presenting this mysterious lover.
But so going back to everything you just described, there's a compelling marriage between what we hear and what we see in all the pieces and installations that we just went through. And going to this installation now on view at the Bergamo station, there's something very central, it seems to me, which is the crossing of space and time. And yes, we're going to get a little more metaphysical here. And, you know, I can see many instances of that crossing, for example, taking the Schindler House as a setting to create new work, reinterpreting the house as a character with a contemporary take, and the list again goes on, right? It's just a very compelling way to what you presented is such a beautiful, obviously multimedia installation, but there's also that almost necessity to cross time and space to really have, well, this mysterious woman kind of like walk in the house, which you described as a body. So there's a lot of metaphors here. And really, it seems to me, as a way to conclude, it seems to me that there's a sense of union that really comes through. And I was wondering if you could maybe just kind of riff on that, this notion of union in the context of your work, and that expression also, how it becomes manifest.
Yeah, so for me, it was, in a way, how do you bring this to people, right? So it's circling back to that idea that I felt as I entered Rudolf Schindler's house. I felt that I was entering his body, his mind and his body. And so for me, I brought her. The way of bringing them together for me was to photograph her in her thoughts, in her intimacy, as if it was her house, or this idea with solarization that maybe she was there. There's a question, right? Because part of the image is dematerialized. It's not photography as a proof, it's photography as partially experimental and partially dematerialized. But the idea is that I photographed her inside the house, at times with the background of the house in the background, but at times also with the shadow of the architecture over her body,
Which we can see here in this image.
Yeah, we can show a few others too, but it does for me bring together those two bodies. and yet it still allows us to question, did they ever get together? Because in my photography, I don't really have a record of it in the sense the photography has a proof. Because using the solarization method, that question remains open.
Boris, do you want to add anything to this notion of union and how we're getting metaphysical here?
I don't carry secrets without me. With me.
Well, maybe we can share images.
Or maybe can we share all of them a little bit? Just
If we share all of them as a grid.
no, one by one. We can
One by
just
one?
go quickly over.
Everything?
Yeah.
All right. And then I'm gonna open the floor to questions.
Here, this one. Oh, wait. Yeah. So do I press down?
Down, yeah.
Sorry, guys. We're learning. We learn fast. So I guess this just, okay. Oh, so here is just kind of going back into, this was the third floor that we were talking about at the Kunsthaus in Germany. And this shows a little bit how you could walk behind. So this is one of the first times that I had some architect friend of mine saying how exciting it is to actually walk over a architectural blueprint. And you can see here people having that, I don't always like to use the word immersive, but they did feel that they were inside the space. And I would then bring together some images of the house just opposed with her, or some architectural aspects of the house that we know and enjoy so much. Here we talked about those, the archive, the letter. This is another little piece of paper that I thought it was so beautiful. Rudolph, the story goes that he used to have a little notepad that he would carry on his pocket, on his jacket. And this one also caught my eye, like symphony of the rooms defined by shape and relation to each other's. Architecture, a new and independent art, and its material is space. So I think all of those nuggets of intimate pieces of paper that he was just writing maybe for himself, or he was taking notes of things that maybe he wanted to use later on, became really interesting for me. This is an image that I took of the house, like I mentioned, with some elements of memory or some elements of peripheral vision to it. I always love this image with his chair there. This is actually a straight shot, but instead of focusing on the house, I was focusing into the main room in the house, but I focused the camera on the glass itself, and the glass was reflecting the garden in the back. So that created that effect. And this is her, in a way, her shadow touching the wall of the house, or entering, is she going to enter? Was she there? Was she not there?
And maybe we can mention also the solarization process, which is happening right here.
Right. And the next one, it's this one here. It shows exactly what I'm saying, where in the left side of her face, you have what you would expect, the natural rendering of black and white photography. And on the right side is this flash of light that you can do into the darkroom. You cannot really plan, it's experimental. Not always it works, but when it works, it creates something very magical, like this one, where she dematerializes. And to me, that solved my visual dilemma of conveying that she is crossing, she's coming from one realm, entering another one, that maybe she was not allowed, or there was some kind of impossibility of the past that didn't allow them to be together. I think that is maybe, that's the one I was like looking for. I think that's the one that gets back to me as being the closest to that union where they are together. It feels like an embrace.
It does. That's such a beautiful way to end our conversation, I guess. Thank you so much, Mona and Boris. And I guess we can open it up to questions now. We're going to engage in a little Q&A. Let's see if we have a few questions in the chats.
Well, somebody wants to know about a bolognese dinner.
Oh, bolognese dinner.
That's what we're gonna have afterwards. I
Yes.
also cook,
Sorry.
my,
Gosh,
I
we
also
cannot
cook for my friends.
we cannot hide anything. We were recorded and heard. Oh my gosh. Yes, Lori.
I'm going to be cooking after this conversation for my two dear friends and my son. We're gonna have pasta bolognese tonight.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions per se, but I'm just really intrigued by the whole way that both Boris and Mona were able to kind of take the Schindler House into this other place. And I mean, that's what's always fascinated me about Schindler House and Rudolf Schindler and Pauline and their relationship and everything that happened in that house. There's just so much, there's so much there. Mona and I had a conversation about this about a month ago when we started talking about putting this talk together. And it's just kind of an incredible wealth of, I don't even know what to call it. It's just an incredible wealth, and it's a house that was built over 100 years ago, and it doesn't feel like that. There's just so much that's contemporary about it and meaningful, and allows people like Mona and Boris to continue to enliven it in a new way for people to experience today,
Yeah,
which
well,
I think is
it is
fantastic.
it is fascinating that the house, Rudolf Schindler's work has inspired so many artists. And I have to say, I'm also very thankful for the support of the friends of the Schindler House, of the Max Center, the architectural archives at UCSB, in a way, because I received, the opportunity of having access to this beautiful place, but also because of the idea of keeping it alive through the works of other artists. And it was pretty interesting for me to see how the work itself grew, how I found my little key into it, like that love letter for me resonated very strong inside of me. And that was my point of departure into this project. But there's so much. I mean, I would like to encourage many artists to go there and take a look and go to the archives. There's so many stories that keep unfolding. There's a lot.
Can we mention your book?
Oh yes, and there is a book. I did publish a book with all the photographs called King's Road. It is a book with photographs of the house, and hold on, and it has various beautiful things inside. It has a text by David Dorenbaum and by Silvia Pereira from the UCSB archives. It's quite it's really nice. So if you guys want it, you can always get it. Let me know. It's available.
No.
I think they have a few also at the Max Center.
Yogan, there's a couple of questions there. Did you catch those?
Let me see.
From Lena and about the idea of transgression and boundaries as it pertains to the architecture. Can Mona expound on this?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Lena, for your question here. So Lena is interested in the idea of transgression, so I'm going to read it again. Transgression and boundaries as it pertains to the architecture.
Yes.
Can Mona expand on this, please?
So I did transgress and I kept no boundaries, basically. I guess the idea was to break those boundaries. And in a way, I mean, transgression is a bit of a strong word, but in a way was my objective, and maybe I'm overly romantic, but my objective was not to have the boundary between them, not to have, in a way, also how Rudolf mentioned that the house is supposed to be open and have this openness. The glass is like a soul open to your friends. So idea of transgression was not so much part of it. Now, I did have to, of course, ask permission and go through the process of being allowed to photograph in the house, and not at moments where there's other exhibitions in the house and so on. Did I answer the question?
You did.
Okay.
We have a question from an anonymous attendee. Why did Schindler write notes to himself in English rather than in his native language, which was German?
Okay, that's a great question. So thank you for pointing that out. I do speak German, and so I saw all of the notes. We shared here with this group today the English notes. He wrote a lot of German notes. There was a lot of, I'm very grateful that I do know the language that he knows, because I was able to interpret so many things. But another very interesting thing is that in 1920s, the calligraphy was different. The way you write was different. So some of the letters that his mother wrote to him in German, or that he wrote back to his father, or to, for example, a few letters that he wrote to his mentor, the architect Adolf Loos, back in Vienna, they were all in German. But it was the calligraphy of 1920s. So I had to ask friends of my mother that know the calligraphy of the time, if they could actually first decipher the calligraphy, and then we will translate into the English to see if we would like to include those letters or not into this series, because there was so much information that I really wanted to narrow it into a very intimate, personal, even vulnerable, the vulnerable man migrating, coming over here, like, you know, maybe leaving your family behind. I wanted to enter the more emotional, more, more intimate, in the sense of his own thoughts with himself.
And thinking about the question, which was, I think, why did he write in English or German?
Yeah, he wrote on both.
I'm realizing
Yeah.
we're like three immigrants here. Yogan, I do write mostly in English to myself, but sometimes in,
Well, you're German, you have to define.
I'm
it,
German,
yeah.
but
I'm German Brazilian.
I also switch, I have to say.
Yeah, I think he switched like we switch.
I go back and forth, and I dream in
Yeah.
English. So I guess
Yeah,
I,
exactly.
yeah.
But you count in French.
No, I can in
You
English.
count in English as well? Yeah, I still count in Portuguese. Yeah, so in a way, to answer the question, there were plenty of notes in mostly two languages, German and English.
So we have now a question from Nelson. Please mention that the premiere of the film on Schindler is being shown at the New York ADFF this weekend. So it's
Yes.
not a question, okay? So this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
a nice
So it is,
reminder.
It is Valentina's movie.
Valentina Geneva, yeah.
Yeah, she's fantastic. I am. We have been supporting each other's project along the way. It has been a couple of years that we know each other and we supported. It opens. I don't have the specific information here with me right now, but it opens this weekend in New York. I'm cheering for her. We even collaborated. She's using one of my images on the movie poster, and my thoughts are with her this weekend.
Now we have a question from Richard. He's seen a number of your exhibits, Mona, and owns a book from the exhibit. It's like you're looking through, I'm going to just read it. It's like you're looking through a prism at your subjects of interest. And then, so wonderfully, you explore a number of different paths and take us along for an amazing ride. Can you talk at all about what you're currently working on? What are you working on currently? Another facet of this work, maybe, or something totally new?
Well, so I think Boris touched base a little bit when we did the fruit factory project. It was based on a work that I did in a glass house with a lot of sun in the middle of the desert, outside of Joshua Tree. So that was about, in a way, in a nutshell, because that's a really long question. In a nutshell, that was how the figure is in relation to light and how it refracts itself when it gets reflected through glass and mirrors in that environment. So in the language of figurative work, it was about refracting the figure. Continuing the language, if you bring that into the King's Road work, it is about transporting the figure in time and space. And my next series is really about surrendering to mortality. So I'm going to just leave you with a seed. Stay tuned.
And finally, we have a question from Nelson. Where are the notes archived? Is there a publication with his notes?
So the notes that I thought were relevant to this story, to this factual and fictional story that I created, are in my book. So you can see them there. There are plenty. 1/3 of the book consists of the archive work. 1/3 is the images I took of the house, and 1/3 is of the mysterious woman. But for the entire archive of Rudolf Schindler, the best place is the Arts, Design and Architecture Museum and Collection at UC Santa Barbara. That's the place that I went. It's wonderful to work with them. It's accessible, and there's plenty to see there. And it might be that Rudolf Schindler has one of the largest archives there. So allow yourself some time.
Well, thank you again, Mona and Boris. It's been a fun conversation, and thank you all for joining us today. And Anne, over to you for some words of conclusion.
Thank you, everybody. Yogan, Mona, Boris, it was really an incredibly fascinating and inspiring talk, really. Just what I said before, I just think there's so much there, and you want me to make a trip out there. I wish I had been there for the performance, and maybe I'll do it again. One question I have, though, is, Mona, if someone is interested in your book, how do they get in touch with you?
They can send me an email, info@monakuhn.com, and we will make it happen.
Kuhn is Kuhn,
Yes.
by the way. So this concludes our 5th talk tonight of 2024. Please, everybody, thank you for joining us. Thank you for all your time putting into this presentation. And come visit us again in November. And please visit the Schindler House. Please, if you can, continue to support us financially and physically, emotionally. We need all of that so that we can keep this place alive and inspiring future generations. So have a great night, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thank